Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Manifusion here with another episode of Sky Factory 3. So I've been working on some organic structures, trying to, decorate this place a little bit, using a lot of deco craft and whatnot. So I think it looks pretty. Trying to get my little forest going on. Oh dear. So yeah, I've been working on some stuff, trying to get this all decorated, and not really good at I'm not beating that dead horse. Been working on getting this place looking better, trying to get some stuff going on. Got my my sewer system up and running. It's pretty neat. So I think today what we're going to be working on is this little farming situation down here. Let's get ourselves set up and moving on. So down here I have the guts of my sieving system, which currently is independent of my actual main storage system, so that I never had to worry about, it eating up all the resources and running out and whatnot. But I think we can expand it a little bit and optimize its layout, because right now it's very much inoptimized. I'm gonna actually use a more optimal pattern that I think is like 33% more efficient, something like that. But yeah, so when I was working on this, obviously the base was a lot smaller and I didn't have as much stuff working here. But I've expanded this a little bit, and I'm pretty sure that we can do a lot more with this. So I think what I'm going to do now is tear out this entire system, and we're going to start merging the new storage system with this, and it's going to be pretty cool. One of the things I'd like to point out is for systems like this, like all of my farms, I do require a couple things for it to be considered complete. One of which, it needs to have a storage system set up that no matter how long I have the system running, it will never overfill into my generic storage stuff. So like how this stuff will never... Oh dear. Will never overflow into the main system, and will always have this redundancy. Even if I left this on for like 200 years, I still have this system which will feed off any overflow and just void it. And that's set up for every one of these. But this was also set up before the main storage, which now has an entire mystical agriculture, set up, which is one of the reasons why I made that above there. Let me show that off real quick before we get started. So yeah, I have this entire section that's just dedicated to mystical agriculture, which currently has everything possible except for basalt, because I honestly don't know how I'm supposed to get that. And as I probably have mentioned before, I've never gone off-world, so if it's possible to get that stuff in like the underneath, well, I haven't gone there yet. But yeah, so right now what I'm going to be using mostly is these cloches, which can basically use mystical agriculture to make infinite amount of seeds. And what I'm using them for is making the different dirt, gravel, sand, dust, and nether and end versions of stuff for my sieving system, which actually gets fed in up here. Which honestly isn't as optimal, because you can speed these up by putting food into them, and I could use that with like mechanical users, which if we can optimize the space that's being used, I might as well do. But for now, because I'm using, let's see, because I am using the refined storage system on either side, it's not capable of doing that, although it is possible for me to switch to an Ender IO conduit system to feed in the items, which would actually make it so I would have an extra space available instead of having to use like the exporter there. Yeah, so what we're gonna try to do, because I'm pretty sure that system over there is not connected. Yeah, like this is just running in the power. I can actually run in items through the same system, which means I can start running in food through a different system. That way I could still have this appeal. Because right now all of these different heavy sieves actually have the highest efficiency of a mesh of a specific type. Because I'm trying to get all the optimal items from these systems, as you can see. And right now I have the system turned off so that it won't actually export any of this stuff. So yeah, I don't have to worry about this overflowing into the system currently. But yeah, because I want this to be disconnected as we're working on it. But yeah, I think right now we're going to tear down this entire system and start replacing its guts and adding more stuff and optimizing it. So I'm going to do that now, and we'll cut back to after I tear everything out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are currently back. As you can see, we've definitely cleared out this area. So first thing we're going to need to do is on either side of these, I want to make an 8x8 area, because that's going to be where we're putting our farms for the maximum efficiency. It's one of those things where the larger you make it, the more efficient it will become, but it's at 8x8, it's the most efficient while being the least amount of space, because past that, we have to keep the pattern going for marginal gains. So I have, should be all, or at least most of the stuff we're going to need here. If you want to take a screenshot of all the stuff. Again, it's going to be much more than necessary, but I just want to make sure that I didn't have to constantly look through our storage system, because it can be kind of laggy, as there are a lot of stuff to go through. So we might need to be moving these wires out of the way, but for now I just kind of want to get an idea of the space we're going to need. We can always break out these back walls as well if we need more. But yeah, this is what we're going to start by working with. So for here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we actually have just enough, and actually because we can move this down one, we don't have to worry about these wires, and we can actually use them later on for the wall of auto hammers, which we'll use to actually get the dust, the nether crack, and the ender stuff. So for now, I'm just going to fill in the floor here with this painted glowstone. That way the entire area is nice and lit up. Let's see. We actually also will have a spare zone up front, which might be useful later down the line. What we did have over here before was auto-crafters, although because of how we are going to be utilizing this space, we shouldn't need nearly as much of them. Here, let's clear this out as well. But yeah, so we're gonna go all the way back to this wall, and right now we're just gonna fill this up, so while I do that, we're gonna skip ahead. Okay, and we're back with the layout done. So here's the empty 8x8 square, and this is the kind of pattern we're going to be using for the Cloche setup. So what we have is just a simple export area in the center. This is where all the import and export is going to be from the bone meal, the whatchamacallits, the water, and the the storage unit that the cloche feeds into. So those are all going to come out through the center here, and then there's going to be the 4 cloches surrounding it, all facing into this center area, so that we can use the basic storage barrel things to take out all of the resources from each of the cloches. So it's just that pattern repeated over and over, laid in such a way that we can maximize the space between each. As you can see, if we expanded this out more, we can actually fit those areas in and continue the pattern, such as this, and just keep doing that on all the sides. The thing is, we're going to be wanting to minimize the amount of space we have to use. Honestly, we shouldn't need too much to keep this system optimized, especially since it's gotten 1 or 2 more blocks on the sides, and we don't have to worry about as much overlap because we're not worrying about the redundancy that we already have with the storage systems and whatnot. What we will be doing is trying to maximize the amount of space that we can use, and then optimizing the amount of time necessary for each of the production things. Luckily, we won't need as much production with this system, although we will be needing 5 of each of the other compressed units for like the the crushed netherrack and the crushed endstone, as well as the dust. So 15 in total, which we can fit between all of these zones. Shouldn't be an issue. If we want, we could probably also use these walls as well. Although what I do eventually want to do is actually use the storage systems, the drawers. And so we will always have 64 stacks of the items that are actually feeding up into this sieve system. Because that way we'll always have just enough and don't have to worry about making redundant extras. And then with that, we'll actually be able to make sure these things are fully stocked all the time. Because one of the things we have the most use of is actually gravel, because that's making a lot of actual useful resources, and we have each of the different types. That way we can get iron, we can get the gold, the coppers, the coal. We'll need a lot of coal later on, especially once we start getting into Botania. But then we also have some of the extra stuff, like the sand for prosperity shards, because this is one of the best ways to get those. Let's see, this is how we're getting redstone, as well as lead and nickel and whatnot, and crushed black quartz, which we can use into black quartz, but it's not as important. We don't need as much of that, and there's other ways. Then we have the soul sand here to get all this extra nonsense. It's not really necessary, although having decent nether wart, again, not necessarily we have a cloche for that, but it's just one of those things. We might as well be using this space in this mod as much as we can. We have the netherrack one that gets the ardite and cobalt. It's also not very common to get those things, but I figured we might as well. And then the endstone one gets the sulfur pearls, the draconium dust, and the ender pearl powder. Again, a lot of this is redundant once you get into some of the other mods, but I figure it's one of those things, might as well go all out making that. So what we're going to do now, let's see, I'm going to get some wool, just so that we know what space that we'll be utilizing. Let's get some, red dye. It's one of those things where we don't need to do this extra step, but I feel like it's going to make carrying out this pattern and not losing track of where we are a lot easier. So what we're going to do right now is fill in the extra stuff with this red, because this means we'll know not to mess with that. Let's see, I feel like I might have messed up here. Yeah. There we go. Again, the pattern should be pretty symmetrical. So what we're going to do now is break out all of the black wool, because this is where our storage unit and the conduits are going to go. And this is probably going to be the most difficult part of the build. Not because it's necessarily hard, but just because it's going to be a lot of tedious work in a finite space. So we're actually going to dig this down through the floor because we're going to have a setup on the floor below, which is going to have our refined system feeding out into this area. So that's where we're going to make sure that we have an overflow for bone meal and our water tanks. Just make sure this thing can always be stocked and not have to worry about running low on materials. Because that's the thing, we're not going to have like bone meal always be produced, you know, in our system natively, but we will always be feeding, making sure that this system has plenty of bone meal, which usually just means we have an output system leading to one of these small storage crates. Because that way, if we have that, we'll never have to worry about the overload. Also, while I get this set up, I think I'm going to mirror this over here just so that we have a nice symmetrical looking unit, and I'm not going to waste your time watching that. So we mirrored it on both sides. Now let's see how we're going to do this. So first of all, we are going to need 3 different types of conduits. We're going to need our item conduit, our ender fluid conduit, and we'll need, let's see, curious as to whether or not we should do redstone in the bottom, because the top is going to be reserved for our energy conduits just so we have enough room. You know, I think that's something I'll decide whether I want to do later. Because I kind of like having the ability to have the cloches still running, even if it's not feeding out into the system. Just because they don't really take a lot of resources running-wise. It doesn't eat up as much CPU as, say, actually having farms since there's no entities. But it also means that there's a nice backup of resources if I do end up turning off the system. Alright, so let's just worry about these 2 for now. Let's see, so what we're going to do is feed up item conduits up to here, as well as our fluid conduits. Because this is going to feed into the bottom of the cloche itself, and the top of it is going to feed into the storage container. So let's just continue this pattern for each one of these. I think what we're going to do is do one side at a time. One so that I can show you guys what's going on, and then I'll do the second side off on my own. So as you can see, each one of these is going to have the conduit set up. Although what I do need to get out is the conduit probe, because we're going to be doing a lot of copy and pasting so that we don't have to worry about setting this stuff up for each individual one, because that would be a huge pain in the butt. Let's see, so that should be about good. Okay, yeah. So as you can see, each one of them has 2 set up. We're going to eventually connect them all down here and set up secondary rooms for each one. And let's see, for now, let's get that conduit probe. Okay, so what we're going to start doing now is setting up the cloches itself. That way we can feed in the necessary resources for each and show you how it's supposed to orient in this setup. So what we're going to start doing is taking down the white wool in the, what you call it, cross pattern. If I remember right, they orient from the center, so yeah. So standing in where the conduits are, we'll place them all around like this. Because as you can see, these will filter into the bottom, which means I need to have them go up 1. But then the storage crate will go out from the center on the top, which means they will all output there, and then we can use these energy conduits on the top. Again, it's not going to be very easy to get in and out of once we have this set up, which is why I want to be very careful when actually setting this stuff up. So for now, I think I'm going to set those things up, get the cloches in and up the cables one, and then I'll cut back into once we finish that. And we're back. Okay, so I'm just finishing up placing down these conduits. Let's see. Looks like I missed one right here. Okay. So as you can see, this pattern repeats the entire way, which also maximizes the amount of cloches we can have per the surface area that's available. If there is a more efficient way of doing this, I'm not aware of it. Because right now we only have, 8 spots that aren't being used in this repeating pattern. And as far as I can tell, that's as good as I've been able to do. I'll probably run the numbers later, but yeah, this should be a lot more efficient for the amount of cloches we can get. And one of the reasons I have it set up this way is because I do want to maintain my floor and wire area like I have it here. And so this should give us a good spread for our farm. So yeah, one of the things we're going to have to do is set up the conduit layouts for each one of these, and then get under it so that we can do the storage ones, because that's honestly the most pain in the butt one to do, since we can't really do it while we're setting this up. Anyway, so let's get out the conduit probe and I'll show you how I'm going to have these set. So let's just do these first ones here. So for this bottom layer of the cloche, this is where we're going to be pumping in the bone meal and the water. So what I'm going to need to do is get out a bucket of water, let's see, and some bone meal, so I can set up the filters. Also, need to grab some filters. This is to make sure that this system doesn't flow back in itself, and that we're constantly getting exactly what we need where we need it. Okay, so for the item, for the item, we're going to insert, we're going to set it to white, and put a filter for bone meal specifically. Make sure only bone meal will ever go into the system. Also, not that it's really necessary, we're going to up the priority to 10. Just because why not? Okay, then for the fluid, we're going to also have that set to insert and make sure only water is whitelisted. That way, no matter what fluid, gets stuck in the system, only the fluids that this can use will actually be going into it. That, again, it's not necessary to fill this stuff up and set the filters like this, but it does prevent a lot of redundancy, so should be better, in the long run. So what we're going to do is copy those settings and move them around to all the different conduits, making sure that we place our filters in each one, because we actually need the item set for the item filter, whereas for the fluid filter, that will already be set. Okay, so what we're going to do is go around to all of these conduits and do the exact same thing. Okay, now we're back. Now that that's all set up, now for the pain in the butt part. So what we're going to have to do is, let's see, grab a bunch of small storages, then go in for each one of these and place it here in the center. As you can see, this will let each of these garden cloches fill it up and take out everything from the bottom and feed it back into the system. The problem is for these is, as you might be able to tell, going through these Ender IO conduits, it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt to actually get access to them to, properly set these up, and then keep track of which ones we have, and it's just going to be a mess, aside from the ones at the edge, luckily. So what we're going to do is go through all of these, set these storage containers down, and then we almost have a working system. We will need to actually plug these into the power, but that's pretty easy. Then we're going to have to go through and set up all the dirt and the seeds. Again, a lot of tedious things since we're using so many cloches, but it's going to be really neat once we get there. So let's show you how these parts will be set up. So what we're going to have it set to is extract, black, and always active. This is the part where it makes me wonder if we should have redstone conduits, although from my experience, using those with conduit probes is also really tedious because, at least with my experience, it doesn't copy the redstone parts. And having to do each of these individually, no thanks. So if we do end up using a redstone switch for these in particular, we're going to be doing it when the actual storage runs into the system, since it's a lot easier to manage then. So what we also are going to need, probably quite a few of these, are these the Ender.io item speed upgrades, because we want to make sure that this is pulling out all of the items we're getting as fast as possible, so that we don't have any inefficiencies. Definitely make sure it's always on. We don't need to worry about round robin, and we shouldn't need to worry about filters since this can only insert bone meal now that we have those all set up. So what we're going to do is copy that and go through each one of these and make sure to paste it. Also, when you're pasting it, make sure you don't accidentally press shift, because that will just copy it again. Also make sure it's set to the yellow mode, because that's going to be your copy and paste. So yeah, just go through all of these, make sure you put in the item conduits, the settings should be fine. We're going to do that, and then start filling this stuff up with dirt and seeds, and then I'll show you the finished result. Okay, so all the dirt's set into the system. Currently we have 44 units in this 8x8. I think in total I had 90 in the previous system, so it's going to be 2 less with how the current system is set up, but it also used a lot more space. So what I'm going to need to actually do now is calculate how much dirt production, how much stone, sand, and all that other stuff we're going to need before actually hooking this up to the next system. But so far, all we have to do now is plug in the electricity and all these cloches, and to finish up the input system. But that's basically the fundamental part of setting up a cloche array like this. And again, it's infinitely expandable with this setup. So if you want to make this bigger, it's very easy. Also, if you want to make it smaller, very easy. It's just a repeating pattern over and over again. But seeing as how it's been an hour and a half just setting this stuff up, I think what I'm going to do is take a break here, and we are going to continue this in the next episode when we actually get this hooked up to the sieving system and our refined storage. So until then, thank you for watching. This is Manifusion playing Sky Factory 3. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Feel free to support my channel by leaving a like, favorite, or subscribe. It really does help me out a lot, you know. Tell me what you think down below in the comments, and don't forget to follow me on Facebook or Twitter. Check the links in the description. Anyways, this is Manifusion. Signing out, folks. See you next time.